what is going on, everybody? Welcome back into SEC Talk Baseball Edition as we are rolling on in the postseason of college baseball. We started with 13 SEC teams, and we are merely down to 4 teams heading into another weekend of college baseball, with this weekend Super Regional squaring off on Friday, and then as well as some of the series kicking off on Saturday. So, Wade, how was your weekend? I know you and I got to take in some action out there in the box.
Yeah, it was a pleasure going to a postseason baseball game with you, and I think we picked the better game of the weekend for at least for LSU. They put up 12 runs. The pitchers were lights out. They only let up a couple singles, and it wasn't always pretty, but hey, the Tigers got it done last night and survive in advance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tip my cap to Arkansas Little Rock for the fight. I don't know how many times that you heard it, but the team lost 14 of 16 to win the regular season and then had to win their conference tournament. I mean, my gosh, the commentators had to say it every dang time that they had a chance. But before we get into the super regional action, we do have a little bit of news coming out of Starkville. We knew a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a month by now, that Chris Lemonis was fired from Mississippi State. And this is a slam dunk hire to me. Mississippi State hires Virginia head coach Brian O'Connor. Virginia did miss the tournament this season for the first time, it feels like, in quite some time. Brian O'Connor did win the national title back in the 2015 season against Vanderbilt. So how would you grade this hire for Mississippi State? How do you see the near future for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I think this is as good of a hire as they could get to go out and get, let's say a top 5, even top 10 coach to come to Mississippi from an established program. I think that shows where Mississippi State puts their priorities for their athletic program. They're really trying to be one of the elite baseball programs in the conference. They got the facilities. They got some homegrown talent. So I think this is the kind of move that could pull all that together. And if a coach like this was kind of testing the market and they were able to get him before Texas A&M, a team that probably has more money and, equally as good of a team, that's even more of a win because you don't have to coach against them.
Yeah, it was just I think I saw a report a week ago that actually Texas A&M is going to retain Michael Early, which is a bit surprising to me. I mean, with all that, as much of expectations as A&M had. I mean, they were the preseason number 1. They did have a lot of guys coming back from that national championship appearance team, mainly Jay Slavallette. I know that one of their key guys was out for the year with an injury, but I think this is a fantastic hire, especially with the recruiting trail of Mississippi State baseball with the NIL package that they'll be able to have with Brian O'Connor. So this is definitely the step in the right direction. The SEC is better when Mississippi State is good at baseball. Unfortunately, Mississippi State did lose in the Florida State regional. They got bounced by a really talented Florida State team, which we will get whenever we're recapping the Tallahassee regional. And speaking of the regionals, let's go ahead and get into some of our questions from the weekend. And we're going to kind of tie this into the super regionals coming up. But first question of the night is, what SEC team disappointed the most in regional play?
I guess it's got to be the team that got eliminated by a 4 seed, which would be Ole Miss, although I think Murray State played pretty well. Either them or Georgia. I think for Georgia to not even be playing for the regional final, it's not a good look to have 2 other teams playing for the regional final. It's one thing to lose the regional final when you're in it, but it's not a good idea when you're going to summer school and there's 2 teams across the street warming up to play 2 games. So those are the 2 teams that jump out to me, Ole Miss and Georgia.
I think you could have gone with the obvious one in Vanderbilt. They were the number 1 overall seed in this tournament, but that's not where I'm going to go. I'm going to go with a team that actually was very high on coming into this tournament, and it was Florida. I expected much better from this team. I mean, the 2 losses came to East Carolina, and it wasn't even close. This team, pitching-wise, just wasn't right all weekend. I mean, outside of the Fairfield game, the offense was able to produce 17 runs, but that's Fairfield, to be honest with you. East Carolina, though, they should have handled And usually, we see Florida make a deep run. It feels like in back-to-back years now, we have seen this Florida team make it all the way to Omaha. And I know that this has been an injury-prone team heading into this tournament. They had a lot of key guys go down throughout the season. But I just expected more. I mean, Coastal Carolina, though, proved me wrong. I was very high on Coastal Carolina, but I just thought that, Florida has done this every single year. They went on the road last year. They beat a really talented Oklahoma State team, and they just couldn't put together on both sides of the plate. So that is some of our disappointments. I don't know if there's going to be much surprises because I feel like the teams that we expected to move on have moved on. But what's SEC team surprised you the most in the regionals? Could be, a team that struggled late or maybe a team that maybe exceeded your expectations in regional play. So what you got?
And that's kind of how I interpret it. This was going to be my answer for Vanderbilt because, yes, it was disappointing, but it was equally as surprising because they were so hot and they had one of the easier draws, probably the second easiest draw in my opinion. Neither one of us was very high on Louisville. We thought maybe that East Tennessee would be the team that would make noise in that regional. So I was just very surprised that Vanderbilt had all that momentum, winning, 6 in a row at the end of the season, winning the SEC tournament, nabbing the number 1 overall seed, getting a pretty fair draw, winning their opener, and then just completely falling apart, lose 2 in a row. So that was the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Georgia. To me, I feel like Georgia, I felt really confident about this Georgia team, especially playing their home ballpark. We know how it plays. It's 350 down the line and left, and then it's 310 and right. So this is a hitter's ballpark. I did not expect, once again, Duke made it out of this regional. Oklahoma State, though, really showed me. I mean, this was a team that was 28-23 in the regular season. They're able to make some noise in Arlington, the Big 12 championship. But my concern was Georgia's pitching, and that ultimately showed the door for Georgia in this one. They just couldn't keep Oklahoma State's hitters down in that game. Georgia was able to hit a lot of home runs. They had 2 by Slate Alford. He had 2 home runs, and you had even more home runs in that game. But, yeah, I think that was definitely the most shocking surprise to me. Obviously, you could have said Auburn the way that they look throughout the weekend. It felt like Auburn really just breezed to their regional, so you got to give kudos to the Tigers. But it felt like to me, you could have said Georgia, you could have said Ole Miss, you could have said Vandy. You could have gone a lot of ways of what team surprised you. Now let's go ahead and switch our gears into super regionals. We do have the schedule, and I will pop it up on the screen. First, let's go through the games. We'll just go through all the games, and we'll just notify you where the SEC team is. So these are the games on Friday. So you have an ACC battle between Miami and Louisville. The first 2 games will be at 3 p.m., 11 a.m., and then obviously the game 3 is necessary. Those times will be announced at a later date. Number 9 seed Florida State will travel to Corvallis to face off against the number 8 seed Oregon State. Those game times are at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. So obviously on the West Coast, they're going to get the later times there. Then Arizona at number 5 seed North Carolina, both noon games on Friday and Saturday. Then the only game featuring the SEC is number 4 Auburn hosting number 13 Coastal Carolina. You got a late one out there in the Plains, 9 p.m. and 3 p.m. on Saturday. Now, moving on to the series, I'll be starting on Saturday, June 7th, starting off with a West Coast battle at number 15 UCLA, facing off against UTSA. Those games are at 7 p.m. and 3 p.m. Murray State travels to Duke. Those game times are in the afternoon at 1 p.m. and 12 p.m. And then West Virginia, number 6 LSU. I'm sure LSU fans are excited to not see 8 p.m. finally on a first pitch. You'll have a first pitch on Saturday at 2 and then 6 p.m. I believe all these times are all Eastern if you are on the Central Time. So if you're on the Central Time, this would be at 1 and 5 o'clock. And then featuring SEC battle here, number 14, Tennessee at number 3, Arkansas. Those game times are 5 and 3. So it's a little bit spread out. Obviously, if there's a game 3 needed, those game times will be announced. So that is the schedule. And now let's go ahead and start diving into some of these matchups. And as we go on to the Super Regional preview and the picks, we'll also be recapping as we go here to see how these teams fared in the regionals. So let's go ahead and pop this on the screen there, starting with how the Nashville and Hattiesburg regional played out. And the team to watch actually in this regional was Wright State. Vanderbilt needed a walk-off home run on Friday afternoon to defeat Wright State. So Vanderbilt went into the 1-0 game against Louisville. It was a pitching duel. It ended up being a 3-2 win for the Cardinals, and then that sent Vanderbilt and Wright State. Unfortunately, East Tennessee State went 0-2 in the barbecue down there in the Music City. But Wright State was able to get Vanderbilt in the second matchup of this regional. But nonetheless, Louisville is our first ACC team to advance on. So they advance out of the number one overall national seed bracket. Then in Hattiesburg, this was one of the regionals that took 7 games. Alabama was really quickly out of this tournament. They went 0-2. We had a big shocker. The number 4 seed Columbia actually took down Southern Miss on Friday. So that set up a date with Columbia, Miami, and Miami beat them pretty handily there. So that set up Miami into the winners bracket. Southern Miss did defeat Columbia. They also defeated Alabama on their way. And then this is a lot of games to recap, so bear with me, folks. So Southern Miss ended up beating Miami pretty handily in game number 6. And then Miami last night beat Southern Miss 5-4. So we do have an all ACC battle. So for the seeding wise, number 2 seed Louisville is here and number 3 seed Miami. So how this works now, since Louisville is the 2 seed and Miami is the 3, Louisville now gets the host. So wait, we do have an all ACC battle. Who do you think takes the cake and moves on to the College World Series?
I'm going to go with the hot team right now, and that's Louisville. I know Miami exceeded our expectations, came out of a pretty tough regional in Hattiesburg, but I mean, Louisville, to me, they took down the top dogs, and they just kind of staked their claim in that new number 1 spot. Just assume Vanderbilt's identity. Of course, they did get some help from Wright State, but I like Louisville at home. This is a conference series, and if it was in the regular season, I would take the home team in this one.
Yeah, I think that Louisville definitely has a pitching advantage in this matchup. They shut down a very talented East Tennessee State team in the first game. And then when they played Vandy, the only one time, I mean, they only gave up 2 runs in a ballpark that really plays well to the hitters. So I got to tip my cap to Louisville's pitching staff. Miami definitely gave up a lot of runs in their time in Hattiesburg, especially against the first time that they faced off against Southern Miss. I believe Southern Miss was able to tack on 17 runs in that one. So I think that home field is going to pay dividends in this matchup. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if this does go 3 games the way that Miami has been playing. But I will give the benefit of the doubt to the home team. So give me Louisville to punch their ticket. A team that's quite familiar. We haven't seen Miami in quite some time. So this is definitely going to be an exciting matchup in the ACC to watch. Now let's go on to the other regional in the right portion. First off, let's go ahead and recap how the Austin regional went down. Houston, I believe they are Christian now. They used to be Baptist. They went 0-2. Kansas State was able to defeat Houston Christian in that one, but UTSA was definitely the story of this regional. They went 2-0 against Texas after beating them in the regular season. So we haven't talked about Texas, Wade. So what were your thoughts overall on the Longhorns this weekend?
Yeah, don't think you escaped the criticism, Texas. We still think you disappointed. But when the number 1 seed goes down, the number 2 seed doesn't get as much crap. I think injuries caught up to Texas here. I mean, we saw them limp through the SEC tournament. They didn't have enough arms to close that one out. And I think that just, it just came back to get them this past weekend. It shouldn't have, though, against this regional, but UTSA ended up being a pretty sneaky team. They only have 13 losses, so this was a team that we definitely underestimated. But, I was definitely disappointed in Texas as well. And UCLA is the huge benefactor in this because they now get to host. They thought that they were going to have to go on the road to Austin. Well, now they get to welcome a 3 seed to their home stadium. So that's big for the Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, there's parity at the top of the bracket with Louisville and Los Angeles being the host sites for those two regionals. And talking about Los Angeles, let's get to that. And boy, I was completely wrong on UCLA. They absolutely wiped the floor of every team in this regional. I picked Fresno State, and Fresno State did not play.
They went 0-2.
They went 0-2. UC Irvine, I mean, I was disappointed with them. Arizona State really played well in this regional. They faced off against UC Irvine twice, but it was UCLA's bats that awoke. I mean, after being dead in the Big Ten championship against Nebraska, they just need to go back home to Jackie Robinson Field. So we have number 15 UCLA. They are hosting, and like you mentioned, they are going to be facing off against number 3 UTSA. So we both picked against UCLA. Are you doing that again this time around?
I don't know. I mean, UTSA was very impressive. They kind of feel like they could be the Cinderella team. But UCLA proved a lot this past weekend. That was not an easy regional to get out of. So I'm not going to be fooled twice. I'm going to go with the Bruins.
Yeah, I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to keep picking against UCLA here. There's nothing wrong against UCLA, but I was just very impressed with UTSA. I mean, they really dominated Texas if you look at both of those games. I know the score was a little bit closer than expected, but UTSA's pitching really played well in a ballpark where there was a lot of home runs, especially by the Longhorns. But UTSA, I feel like it's going to be the Cinderella story. It feels like we always get a number 3 seed that comes out of nowhere. I feel like a lot of people were looking at UTSA but just couldn't really pull the trigger that they were going to defeat number 2 Texas. That was myself. I probably should have just went with UTSA because Texas losing their ace, I feel like paid all the dividends because once they lost to UTSA in the first game, they just didn't have enough pitching to really get out of their own regional there. So I think that UTSA wins this one. Though, however, I think that this is going to be a 3-game series. I think that UCLA probably gets game number 1, and UTSA finds something in game number 2 and 3 and makes it to Omaha, being the first number 3 seed to make it. So now let's go on to the Tallahassee and Corvallis regional. We did have an SEC team in the Tallahassee regional. Northeastern actually was one of the hottest teams in college baseball, like I mentioned on last week's show. They won 27 in a row. Well, that game winning streak ended in game number 1 as Mississippi State beat them, and they beat them twice once again. Bethune-Cookman went 0-2. But whenever Florida State and Mississippi State squared off, it was just all Seminoles in the first matchup, and same with the second one. Mississippi State was able to get an early lead going to the 7th, and then Florida State's offense was able to wake up there. So what are your overall thoughts on the season for Mississippi State, especially when you fire a coach, midway point of the season?
Well, I mean, I thought that the firing of Lemoyne during the season was a little premature. I thought that it was even a little disrespectful. He got you your first national championship in quite some time, and you're not even going to let him finish out the season. But it definitely seemed like they had a big move in mind, and they needed to go ahead and make that decision so that they could start, maybe talking to O'Connor's agent or whoever they needed to talk to get in his ear. So now it kind of makes sense. I mean, look, you fired your coach, you made it to a regional final, and you just upgraded your coach. I think the program's in pretty good shape. If one of your worst years where you're looking to replace a coach, you put together a playoff season and reach a regional final, I don't think there's anything really to be that worried about. So I like the trajectory of this team, and hopefully they can hit the transfer portal and get some talent on campus.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. As we see number 9 Florida State advance on to the Supers. The other one paired up with the Tallahassee was the Corvallis Regional, the number 8 seed Oregon State Beavers. TCU, outside the SEC, definitely one of the more disappointments of this.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even show up. Like, do they know that they were playing? I don't know, man. They disappointed. I picked them to get out of this regional. I believe you went with Oregon State, and that prevailed. Though it was not an easy task for the Beavers. They did lose their first game to St. Mary's. I mean, it was just the season of the number 4 seeds in all these regional. But Oregon State, you got to give credit to them. They were able to bounce back, and USC actually started out 2-0 in the Beavers, was able to crawl back and win Game 6 and Game 7 in this regional. So this is only one of few matchups in the Super Regional that feature chalk here with number 8 and number 9. So with Florida State traveling all the way to Corvallis, are you picking against the Beavers again, especially with that long travel?
I think that travels everything. I mean, Florida State is one of the more complete teams, but it is tough to go win a super regional in Corvallis. They're a fixture at Omaha. So I'm going to go with the Beavers, another school kind of like Mississippi State that is really trying to become baseball centric. I mean, that's their bread and butter. They don't play Power 5 football anymore or basketball, but baseball, I mean, it's impressive that they've remained a powerhouse. They didn't even have a conference this year, and they were able to keep a competitive schedule and be a national seed. And it pays off when you get to host a super regional.
Yeah, I think that Oregon State's definitely going to have their hands full in game number 1 with James Arnold for Florida State going. That's their ace. They actually saved him for game, not the Bethune-Cookman game, but that he pitched against Mississippi State. He was absolutely dominant against them. So if Oregon State can win that game number 1, I think they're going to be in the driver's seat. Like I mentioned, I think that the travel ultimately will pay dividends for Oregon State here. Florida State's really talented. But a talented team is going to get knocked out here, as I will be picking with the Beavers here. I think they got their kinks out of the way. I mean, they played awful against St. Mary's. St. Mary's really dominated that matchup against the Beavers. They really showed me something coming out of the losers bracket. I mean, it's very tough to lose that first game and come out of this regional being the champion. So give me the Beavers. This was a team that played an independent schedule the whole entire time. Most of their games was on the road, and when they got back to their home crowd, they really showed out this weekend. So give me the Beavers to win this one. Now let's go on to a crazy super regional setup here. First up, let's talk about how the Oxford Regional shaped out. It was actually the Hilltoppers of Western Kentucky going 0-2. It wasn't Murray State. Murray State actually got into the driver's seat here. And we only saw the Ole Miss versus Georgia Tech matchup once, and what a treat it was. Probably one of the best games of the weekend. Very, very high-scoring games this weekend in the Oxford Regional. I don't know how many total runs. It had to be over 100. I feel like it was getting double digits by each team in every single game. But Ole Miss was able to beat Georgia Tech after suffering a loss to Murray State in game number 1. They did save Hunter Elliott for game number 2, which unfortunately bit them in the butt at this one, because at the end of it, they just didn't have any pitching. As the number 4 seed, Murray State Racers race on and join an elite company of number 4 seeds, making it to the Super Regional like 2012 Stony Brook, and then last year with number 4 seed Evansville. We almost had another one that we will get into here in a couple of moments, but Murray State, the 4 seed, advances on. Then the Athens Regional featuring another SEC matchup. We really thought that we were going to get Ole Miss versus Georgia. Didn't even happen. Binghamton was 0-2. Duke actually was in the driver's seat here. They were just waiting the winner of Georgia and Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State, like I mentioned, walked off the Dogs on Saturday's game to move on. And then we saw Oklahoma State and Duke. And Duke actually swept through this regional, and this wasn't the first time that Duke won in Athens. They won a couple of years ago in 2018. So we have Duke versus Murray State, Duke hosting. How do you have this crazy super regional ending?
Man, Duke looked really, really good. If you recall, this team was a top 5 team at one point this season, and then they just kind of fell into obscurity. So tough draw for Georgia. Murray State, I mean, offensively, they look as good as anybody in the country. I was high on Ole Miss. You were high on Georgia Tech. We thought certainly one of those teams would get out if the other fell, but it ended up being the 4 seed. I'm going to go with Duke. I just think that that was a tough regional. That was one that we circled as being one of the toughest. on last week's show. So to get out of that one pretty much unscratched, I mean, I think that shows the level of team they are. I'm a little worried about the pitching for Murray State. In a 3-game set, you're seeing the same batters day in, day out. It's not like a regional where you're getting some different looks. They're really going to know what you have. So I think that does play to the larger school's advantage.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of offense in this regional. There's some boppers on both squads. Like you mentioned, I am concerned Murray State's pitching. They definitely got out. I mean, they're able to score runs. That's why that the pitching, as lacking as it was in this regional, the offense overpowered them to advance them on. But yeah, like you mentioned, this was a Duke team that was really, I think that a lot of people were picking this team to go to Omaha, and I'm going to have that happen in Duke. Really talented team. They're playing like how they were preseason expectations because they started off this season very slow. They got a couple of like head scratching losses. I was like, man, when is this team going to catch fire? And they waited to the postseason to do that.
Right,
so this is going to be an exciting series. I think there's going to be a lot of game threes. I feel like this is just how it's going to be this type of week in 2 evenly matched teams with Duke and Murray State. A lot of offense, but since this one is in Durham, I am going to go with Duke. Man, having a Murray State as super regional would have been something, but they had needed Binghamton to do that. But we see Duke advancing on there. Now let's move on to the Chapel Hill in Eugene regionals here. Number 5 seed North Carolina. This was another regional that went to game number 7. And actually, it was interesting because I didn't really wonder which Witherspoon was going to be going in game number 1. It ended up being Malachi against Nebraska. Oklahoma was able to get by Nebraska, but Kyson Witherspoon, man, probably the biggest surprise of him was giving up 6 runs in the first inning. He was definitely off this weekend, but he's facing one of the red-hot teams in North Carolina. Oklahoma was able to bounce back and beat the Tar Heels in game number 6, and then North Carolina just poured it on 14-4. So all in all, how would you really look at Oklahoma's first season in the SEC?
I think there's ups and downs. This team is another one that, popped into the top 10 for a little bit there. And, then they ran into a couple buzzsaw series. Cade Anderson, that's a memory that we'll be fond of this season. I mean, he shut them down, and that was kind of your welcome to the SEC moment. But they did bounce back, and in a large part led by some great pitching. The SEC is obviously really tough, so to be a 2 seed, nothing to be ashamed of. Going into Chapel Hill and winning is very tough. LSU couldn't do it a year ago, so a good season for sure. But they needed their first rounder, Witherspoon, to step it up on the big stage, and he just didn't get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's go to the Eugene Regional. This was a very interesting one as you had number 12 seed Oregon, Utah Valley, the 4 seed, Cal Poly, the 3, and Arizona, the 2. I did have Arizona making it, but I just didn't see this unfolding as Oregon was the first national seed to be bounced. Though it was one of the most controversial calls of the weekend. Utah Valley This was a crazy scenario. It was 6-5. I believe it was like in the bottom of the 8th here. Oregon potentially scored the game-winning run, but they called malicious contact, and they were able to eject the Oregon player there. So that was definitely an interesting call. It ended up costing the Ducks not only the game but the season, as Cal Poly in game number 2 was able to beat them once again. So we actually saw Cal Poly versus Arizona in the regional final there. And Arizona, I mean, they cruised to this one. I mean, they didn't even face off against the team that they were playing in their ballpark, which is obviously weird. But Arizona, one of the hottest teams coming out of the Big 12. We were all looking at TCU maybe being that team to get out, but it was Arizona. So we do have number 5 seed North Carolina and Arizona in Chapel Hill. How do you have this one shaping out against really 2 hot teams in college baseball?
I've been pretty high on North Carolina ever since the bracket was unveiled, and I did have Arizona beating Oregon, so I did see this matchup coming. It's actually 2 teams I'm really fond of. I think Arizona's experienced enough, but just as we talked about Oregon State having the advantage travel-wise, I think this is where North Carolina catches a break. I mean, they got as tough of a draw as anybody, um, in their regional, but I think geography might have played to their advantage there too. And it certainly does here because even if Oregon won, it was going to be a long trip for the Ducks. So I do like North Carolina at home here. I think it'd be pretty cool to see UNC and Duke face off at some point in Omaha. I'm not sure. I guess it would have to happen in the championship,
Yeah.
but it would be cool to see both teams from the Tar Heel State in Omaha.
Yeah, I'm going to go with North Carolina. This team is an absolute wagon right now. I mean, they're just unbeatable at home. I know they lost to Oklahoma, but yeah, this is going to be a really solid matchup there. But man, North Carolina's offense really showed a lot, especially like I mentioned, again going up against a guy like Hyston Witherspoon, who's one of the best pitchers in all of college baseball, and they tagged 10 runs total on him. So give me North Carolina. This team is playing out of their minds right now. They made the ACC title run, beating a Clemson team that I guess wasn't very good, as we will get into here in a couple of minutes. Now let's go to the Baton Rouge and Clemson Regional, and these two pairings definitely gave us a lot of excitement. You probably think that we wouldn't get too much excitement for these pairings. Well, let's start off in Baton Rouge with number 6 seed LSU, who was the 6th seed in the national seeds. Rhode Island, unfortunately, did not bring their pitching down south as they got knocked out pretty early. Unfortunately for them, also, they did have to play Dallas Baptist. That game didn't end until like close to 2 a.m. because they had a weather delay that pushed LSU's game to 8 p.m. So Rhode Island didn't probably get back to their hotel like 3 a.m. and then they had to flush that loss and play at 2 p.m. Against a Little Rock team that didn't put up any runs against LSU in the first game. They got blanked. Then all of a sudden they put up 22. Then they put up like 11 against Dallas Baptist, who got shut out by LSU in the Saturday game, 12-0. And the little engine that could continue to chug as Little Rock pulled off the upset against LSU in game number 6, 10-4. And then once again, you thought that Cinderella was going to put on the slipper as they were up 5-1, but LSU's offense was able to really close this one out. And you got to tip your cap to Casey Evans. I feel like he was the MVP and really saved your season at that point with 6 shutdown innings. So all in all, Wade, what was your overall thoughts? I know we were at the LSU versus DBU. We all thought that this was going to be LSU versus DBU, but it was Arkansas Little Rock that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, definitely not the regional final matchup I thought we'd see. Little Rock was a great story coming into the regional. You know, they rallied to get into their conference tournament and to win it. But it really became maybe the story of the weekend outside of Murray State actually getting it done as a 4 seed. So, yeah, really valiant effort from the Trojans. Dallas Baptist, they just looked a little off this weekend. I think they're a better baseball
team. They're fielding, man. They were one of the best fielding teams. They had a lot of errors in this region.
Yeah, just uncharacteristic. And then I saw that their Friday night guy is supposed to be a top 3-round pick, and he wasn't overly impressive in relief against LSU. So, yeah, but hey, survive in advance. LSU gets it done. I think one encouraging thing from the Tigers was how much the bottom of the order carried this team.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Jones couldn't have had a worse regional. I think he went like 2 for 20, and there's, of course, the fireworks with the home run and his last at bat, but he didn't contribute much. The only top of the order guy that really did was Fry, and I think it was a genius move.
I mean, outside of Dickinson's 2 home runs, he really didn't do much the rest of the weekend. But Luis Hernandez, to me, was the X factor of this regional. He definitely had a phenomenal game, especially against the 2 times that they faced off against Little Rock.
Yeah, absolutely. He brought the thunder, and that's the kind of bat that Jay Johnson wanted to bring to this lineup. So, hey, look, if your 8-hole hitter's hitting 2 home runs and your 9-hole hitter gets his first home run of the season, you gotta bet that the guys at that top of the order are gonna figure it out. So I think this LSU team is still a force to be reckoned with. And I think a third pitcher has finally arrived in Casey Evans. It's time to rip off those training wheels and start him game 3. Hell, start him game 2 if you like the matchup. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he's that good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, you pretty much have 3 starters that you can toy where you want to put them there. So we'll see how LSU shapes up their pitching matchup. I do want to get into DBU here. I think what went wrong for DBU there when they were down like 5-0, whenever they decided to start Micah Bucknam, they actually went to their number 2 guy who was supposed to be starting if DBU was able to get out of this. It was Elwanger, who was their Saturday night guy the whole entire season. And they went to him when they were down like 5-0 and Katie Anderson was on the opposite side. At that point, just put in somebody else because you are not going to be scoring 5 runs. And it ultimately didn't really matter as DBU. I think that's really where they lost the regional, was using their 2 horses in a game that they were never going to come back in. So that was probably, if you're a DBU fan, that's probably where, and you could probably blame your head coach in that decision. But ultimately, LSU was able to survive in this one. But man, they couldn't. It took all this team to dispose of Little Rock. I mean, this was definitely a dangerous number 4 seed. The record doesn't show it, but man, I wouldn't be shocked if we see this same team back in somebody's regional and making some more noise there. They got a really solid team there. Now let's go on to number 11 national seed, the Clemson Tigers. USC Upstate went 0-2. They got disposed pretty quickly. Kentucky actually was out of the SEC here, took down Clemson in an absolute beatdown, 17-4. And that one, Kentucky's offense really showed up, especially against the game against West Virginia. It looked like Kentucky was going to dominate West Virginia, but West Virginia's offense was able to climb back. I think they won that game like 12-11. So West Virginia moves on there. But talk about Kentucky's season. We didn't know that this was going to be a team that was even going to make the tournament, after losing a lot of guys from their Omaha team last year. So how do you think overall that Kentucky did on this season, how they fared in this regional?
Yeah, and as soon as we moved on from that question about which team was a surprise on the weekend, I think the positive answer to that is Kentucky.
Yeah.
This team definitely did impress here in the regional. And like you said, I think they had a pretty impressive season. Just a pesky team, but, I thought Kentucky showed a little bit more pop in this regional, not necessarily with home runs, but just hitting it to the gap, not necessarily slap bunts and stuff we've seen them do in the past, but their base running is always top notch and it gets in the pitchers' heads. And I thought this team did the best with what they could. But West Virginia, man, that's a team that can hit. So there's going to be a lot of offense on the Bayou.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So the Baton Rouge Super Regional now features number 6 LSU in West Virginia. We almost got this matchup if LSU was able to close it out in Chapel Hill. West Virginia ultimately went to Chapel Hill, and North Carolina made it to Omaha. So how do you have this matchup facing off? Like you mentioned, probably a lot of offense once again. 2 very talented offenses. So how do you have this one shaping out down there in the Bayou?
Well, I think it's power arms versus power hitting. And that could go many ways. I think if LSU can limit the walks, and I think you are going to let up some home runs in this series and some big hits, but if you can limit the walks and those big hits come with just one guy on or none, I think LSU can skate by. But if you get yourself in these situations where there's runners on second and third or bases loaded even, and West Virginia gets a big knock, it's going to be hard to come back from. But I think LSU's got the best pitching remaining in this tournament, with Casey Evans stepping up as the third guy, and a pretty solid bullpen beyond that if they can throw strikes. So I think pitching's the difference. I think LSU can go toe-to-toe with West Virginia swinging the bat if the top of the order comes alive. And I think the pitching just puts them over the edge. So give me LSU, and bold prediction, I think they do it in 2.
Okay, yeah. I mean, definitely wouldn't be shocked at that, especially with the power arms leading the way. I think you're going to see Cade Anderson going in game number 1. He did start against Dallas Baptist on Saturday, and we did see Anthony Ianson last night. I think he only threw like 20 pitches, so I mean, it was just like a bullpen every day. So I think that he's going to be ready to go for game number 2 against Saturday. And you got to go to game 3. I think that's where you see Case and Evans. I think that they tried to get with Zach Cowan, but I think that a lot of more teams are on his breaking ball now. I mean, the changeup, I think that a lot of teams are just sitting on it and they're barreling up the ball. You saw Little Rock, especially at the top of the order, do it as well. And Cano, the MVP of the Baton Rouge Regional, he really stepped up there. But yeah, I think I am going to go with LSU. I think that the home crowd is really going to help this team. You saw it in the big games on Saturday and as well on Monday night. I think that this is going to definitely be a sold-out crowd, standing room only. Once again, the Super Regional always draws a bigger crowd just because there's a lot more at stake because the trip to Omaha and LSU fans know how to get this team there. So I think that LSU will punch their ticket and head back to Omaha. Though it's going to be a very tough series because this West Virginia club wants a little bit of revenge because they got swept by North Carolina last in the Super Regional. So this is a team that desperately wants to make it to Omaha. So this is going to be a pesky team that you're going to knock out once again. But I will go with the Tigers to move on there. So now let's go on to two more Super Regionals to get. We do have the Conway Regional that did feature the Florida Gators, but number 13 seed Coastal Carolina survived and advanced. Fairfield went 0-2. Didn't really show many fight in this one, though. East Carolina, definitely impressed with them. Their 2 wins came against Florida. They got rocked by Coastal Carolina in their first game. And then 1-0. Who would have thought that we would see a 1-0 game after you have like 17-10 and 12-4, 12-10 and all these other games and all these regionals? Coastal Carolina winning 1-0 to advance on to the Supers. And then we have Auburn, the number 4 national seed. They really took care of business with Central Connecticut State, NC State, and Stetson. So Auburn definitely look impressive there. So honestly, this is a matchup that I'm really excited to see down there in the Plains with number 4 seed Auburn and number 13 Coastal Carolina. We have making it back to Omaha.
This is tough because Auburn is very good at home. They looked pretty unblemished this past weekend. Coastal Carolina, I mean, they handled a very tough regional as well, pretty much with ease. I got to go with Dutton and Auburn. I think this team's set up well for a super. I think they got a big advantage in game 1 with him on the mound. And if they can just piece it together the other 2 games with pitching, I think they can get it done.
Man, this is a tough one. This is definitely game 3 written all over it, especially with 2 talented pitching staffs with Auburn and Coastal Carolina. You could definitely give the home crowd advantage here, and I am going to go with Auburn. Like you mentioned, this team just plays differently when they're at home. Same thing with Coastal Carolina. They've definitely been dominant in their own ballpark. I think this is a very evenly matched. These are 2 evenly matched teams, both really talented lineups, but I will go with Auburn at home. If this was in Conway, I'd probably be going with a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
Go with Coastal. But since this one is in the Plains, I will be going with Auburn. So far, we do have 2 SEC teams punching their ticket to Omaha. And like I mentioned, that we start with 13. At max, we're only going to get 3 if LSU, Auburn. And we can't get more than that because Arkansas and Tennessee both facing off. That's going to eliminate 1 more of our 4 that we have now. So let's go ahead and get to the last one that features a very exciting matchup between 2 head coaches that don't really like each other. First up, let's go to the Knoxville Regional, number 14 national seed, Tennessee. You had Miami of Ohio. This was a team that battled against Wake Forest. They almost had Wake Forest eliminated. It was like a 14-13 type of game. They had the winning run just 180 feet away. They just couldn't get it home as Wake Forest beats. Wake Forest ended up losing to Cincinnati in the first game. Cincinnati got they just couldn't really handle Tennessee in that second game, especially with Marcus Phillips on the mound. And Wake Forest pulled Tennessee to a game 7, and Tennessee behind Andrew Fisher having a fantastic regional at home in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. So Tennessee advances. And in the Fayetteville Regional, Arkansas, after many years of struggling at home, they swept through their regional. Kansas went 0-2, which definitely was another disappointment out of the Big 12. Creighton actually went through this one as North Dakota State picked up a win against Kansas. But, I mean, every time Creighton and Arkansas faced off, Arkansas was just they were one of the leading teams in all the country in home runs. And man, this is a team that's really looking complete. So we did see this series just a couple of weekends ago. Arkansas did win this one 2-1. So do you have Arkansas doing the same, or do you have Tennessee, the defending champs, making it back to Omaha?
I got to go with those defending champs. This is one of my upsets of the weekend, if you want to call it that. I think these are pretty much two of the heavyweight favorites here. But I like the experience of Tennessee, and that's not a 14 seed I want coming into any of these super regionals. I think this is a very tough test for Arkansas. And yeah, I just kind of think Tennessee's embracing that underdog role a little bit. Them beating Wake Forest certainly felt good. That's a team that's been right there with them in Omaha the last couple seasons. So to break through and have momentum after winning that matchup, and now they get to take down a bitter SEC rival, like you said, between two teams that might not like each other so much. And by the way, Arkansas wrecked Tennessee's football dreams a little bit this year too.
That's right.
So I think Tennessee gets the revenge and back to Omaha.
This has another game 3 written all over. There's absolutely no way that one of these teams sweeps. I'll be shocked if that does happen. But like you said, two talented teams that definitely have a lot of postseason experience. And that game 1 matchup is going to be everything with Zach Rude going for Arkansas and Liam Doyle stepping up to the mound there. And I think whoever wins that game is probably going to really be set up to win this whole thing. This was a tough one to me, but I am going to go with the Hogs here, especially against their home crowd. It's definitely tough to beat a team and win 2 series in one season. But I think that this Arkansas team is playing well at the right time. There's going to be a lot of fireworks in this one. These are the 2 high-powered offenses that can just hit the ball out of the ballpark. So I wouldn't be shocked if you see at least 10 home runs throughout this whole entire Super Regional. But I will go with Arkansas, though I have this going in game number 3. So that is all of our Super Regional matchups. Let's go ahead and dive into some more questions, and we will get into which Super Regional matchup are we most excited to watch this weekend.
I think we just talked about it. Arkansas and Tennessee. I think it's got all the star power. Baum Stadium's going to be going crazy. We'll see if Tennessee's bats can travel. They like hitting the ball at home. Sometimes it's not as good on the road, but I do think they get it done. But I got a lot of respect for Arkansas too. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Hogs do pull it off.
That's a pretty good one, but I will go with something different. I'm going to go to another SEC team here. I'm going to go with the Auburn versus Coastal Carolina Super Regional. I think that's not going to have as much fireworks as Fayetteville has. I think that the pitching is definitely phenomenal in the Super Regional. But can Coastal Carolina do what they did back in 2016? Because I definitely think they have the pieces to win this whole thing. They could take down Auburn, especially the way that they've been playing at home. So I'm definitely excited for that. Obviously, there's a lot more Super Regionals to watch. So that is our 2 to watch with Auburn and Coastal, and with Arkansas and Tennessee. Now let's go on what we did with last weekend. We looked at the key players to watch for the regional. Now we're on to the next round, to the supers. First up, let's start with the key pitchers from the SEC teams. So which gunslinger are you going with?
Yeah, you mentioned in that first game between Arkansas and Tennessee, you got Doyle versus Root. I think there's a lot of pressure on Root to outduel the potential number 1 overall pick. But he will have the home crowd behind him. I think if he can give Arkansas 6 quality innings, hopefully 7 of less than 3 runs, I think that Arkansas wins that game and ultimately the series. So pressure is on Root's shoulders.
Yeah, you mentioned the guy that I'm going to pick, and that's the guy going to go against Zach Root in the Friday game, and that's going to be Liam Doyle. Last time that the 2 teams faced off, Doyle did not have his best outing, as Arkansas really tagged him in the first couple of innings. And I think that whatever team can save their bullpen is going to ultimately win this series here. So I think, like I mentioned, I think whoever wins game number 1 wins this series. That's usually how it goes, especially with these type of arms taking the mound. So we both going with Zach Root and Liam Doyle as our pitchers. Now going to the hitting side, which hitter really needs to step up for their team to make it to where they belong?
I'm gonna kick it over to the LSU regional. I think Ethan Fry's got to continue to be the leader. We'll see if Jay Johnson slots him into the 2 spot. Personally, I would be A-okay with that, even the 3 hole. But he kind of feels like the bat that's going to step up for the Tigers. And look, he might play his way into being a top 5 round pick in this year's draft. He's obviously got the frame. He can play a couple different positions. He's DHing right now just because the Tigers have such a stacked infield, but he could very well be somebody's starting first baseman or even catcher. We've seen him behind the plate with LSU before. So he's a very intriguing player to me, and he's swinging the hot bat right now.
Yeah, I was going to go with an LSU player, but don't want to go double LSU. I will say that Jared Jones definitely has to step up for this LSU offense to get out of the Super Regional. So I'm going to go with one of the guys that I mentioned in my Super Regional matchup I'm most excited for, and that's Ike Irish. Irish definitely had a phenomenal regional. So against a really talented, I mean, they're going to face 3 solid arms, Coastal 1, 2, and 3. There's really no drop-off from all 3 of those guys there. So this Auburn offense, especially playing their home ballpark, definitely has to step up. And I think that Ike Irish, I know that's the easiest answer, but your best players have to step up in these type of games. So I'm going to go with Ike Irish there. So that is it for our Super Regional preview and picks. Tune in to next week as we will have our field of 8. You have something to say before we leave? It looks like
yes.
You do.
I do have a bonus question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
I've seen it on Twitter, and this is what made me think of it. Are you a fan of just letting it play out as is, or would you rather see these matchups get reseeded essentially after the regional round? Would you like to see the remaining national seeds get re-ranked in order and then paired up?
Nope. I think it's good how it is.
Chaos as is?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Look, I don't want to reseed, but one thing I would be in favor of is if you take out the 1 seed, aka Louisville, I mean, they are hosting because the team they face lost, but let's look at the Texas regional. UTSA took down the number 2 overall seed. What did UCLA do to deserve to host this weekend? I mean, yeah, they took care of business. They won their regional, but UTSA to me has earned home field advantage. They took out the number 2 seed.
So you're saying like since Louisville took down like the number 1, they should host automatically. Like with UTSA, right. Since they beat number 2, they should host.
The winner of that regional. If you take out the 1 seed, you're now the 1 seed. If you take out the 2 seed, you're the 2 seed, and earn that right. Because UCLA didn't do anything special. I mean, they had a good regional, but they did not take down Texas. And now they get the advantage, and UTSA's got to go back on the road again. So
a tougher road trip.
Yeah, I think you either reseed to make it like fair, or you just say the home field advantage carries with the regional winner. But you run into the issue with like some of these schools are too small and they've booked out Little League tournaments and all this crud that you just can't really prepare for. But I don't know. I just think it's interesting. You got heavyweight matchups with Arkansas and Tennessee, Florida State, Oregon State, but then you got a bunch of these 3 seeds. Yeah,
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's a fair point. But that is going to be it for our Super Regional preview and pick show. Like I mentioned, tune in to next week's show as we preview and make our picks for who we're going to have winning the 2025 National Championship as we have our College World Series field. We'll see how many SEC teams we get. It could be a few as 1, could be as many as 3. So I thought that we were probably going to get like a full field. But nope, the SEC definitely laid an egg this weekend in the regionals. But we will be talking about it no matter how many SEC teams are in the field of 8 next week. So tune in to that. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in to today's show. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you here next time right here on the SEC Talk.